Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining me for today's 501c Drop. I'm Leya Simmons. I'm co-founder and CEO of BetterUnite. I don't usually say that in that order, but I am all of those things. I'm really glad you chose to spend a little bit of time on your Tuesday with us as we are barreling towards the end of 2025. We are in the final stretch of this year. So today is all about looking back at 2025. It's almost behind us. And my goal is really simple to help you and all of us kind of make sense of the year that we just survived, so that we can walk into 2026 with a little more clarity, some more confidence, and maybe a little bit less stress and anxiety. I was sharing on a social video that I shared about having seen Dr. Arthur Brooks. He is a professor at Harvard who studies neurobiology and interpersonal relationships with people. He studies a lot of things. I'm sure that I'm not getting that right, but he talks a lot about these things. Let's put it that way. And he was talking about how the human brain is really patterned. It is built to focus more on the negative than the positive. And there's really good reason for that. Anthropologically, our animal brain needs to understand all of the possible dangers and prioritize those, potential dangers out there on the savannah over thinking about, wow, it's really great that I just grabbed this gazelle and, oh, nice watering hole. It's very pretty here, right? Like that did not serve us in surviving. And so it makes sense that we do hyper focus as people and as a society on the negative. If you look at data around, what algorithms boost, and for good reason, because people are much more likely to click on a negative headline than they are on a positive headline. This is just how we're built. It doesn't serve us as much anymore, however, because there are fewer lions out there racing towards us. We don't have that same level of scarcity existence that we did, our forebears did. So what we do know too is that acknowledging and paying attention to the positive will actually end up attracting more positive. So that is my goal today. It's a very long and strange tangent to get us to what I'm hoping to provide today. Everybody has weighed in on the difficulties of this year for our nonprofit sector, and I have zero doubt that you have felt it. I have every understanding and no desire to downplay any of that. As a matter of fact, the nonprofits that I have been involved with have had to close. I work with a lot of recovery organizations now. I serve on boards. We've had to close because of a lack of government funding, trickled down from cuts on the federal level to state level funding of programs. I just spoke to another recovery organization that had to close their entire detox, like building with jobs, with people, with real humans. These are very big and impactful cuts that really did a lot of I don't want to say damage, but it's true, of harm to not just nonprofit folks, not just the staff, but also to our clients, also to the communities that we serve. So I have no illusions or desire to downplay any of that. At the same time, I know that, I'm looking here. I see executive directors and development staff, and I saw earlier that we've got some board members showing up, and there's probably a few of you that are consultants or the volunteer that wears every single hat, or the volunteers that's the only person that works with the nonprofit, volunteer, founder, sole employee. I've actually sat in where each of those descriptors is. I've sat in these seats over the course of my 20 years of involvement with nonprofits. And what I know is that wherever you sit, however you arrived here today, you're carrying a lot. You've got budgets and teams and boards and expectations. And then of course, under all of that is a mission and real people and entities that rely on you and your work. And all of it matters so much. So I want today to feel like a deep breath, a reframe, that kind of breath where you receive breath as opposed to taking it, where your diaphragm expands and your shoulders relax and the muscles around your eyes and your face, they soften. That's what I'm hoping to hope that we walk away with today, is a sense of settling. I don't want to create more noise for you. So just a conversation, just us, and a little bit of data, obviously sprinkled in. We've also got our State of Giving report. BetterUnite just released our 2025 State of Giving, and also from the thousands of nonprofits that we work with and that I talk to, frankly, across the country. Also, the nonprofit specialists that I've been fortunate enough to sit in the room with this year. There's a lot out there. There's a lot of information, and I promise it is not all bad. There's a lot of good. I say all the time, I remain a nonprofit optimist. So, but to put some structure around this, I'm going to walk us through three big movements that we saw this year. First of all, how did 2025 go? The good, the bad, the ugly, the hard, the weird, all of it. What changed in donor behavior, and what does that mean for how we fundraise? And finally, how do we reframe 2025? And I'm going to kind of hit on this throughout. How do we reframe 2025 into a launch pad for 2026? Some really, I hope to provide for you some really concrete moves that you can take back to your team so that you are ready for the next year. And if you've got a question, or if something sparks an idea or a conversation you'd like to have, jot it down, throw it into the chat. The chat will pull out any questions. If I've got some time, I'll try to answer them live. But if not, I will follow up with you. We always reach back out. Everybody that's here will also receive the recording. So no need to ask me to repeat anything. You're going to get the recording in a couple of days, actually, with a really wonderful kind of AI helped synopsis of what I've said, transcript. So you're going to get all of this information. Just sit back and maybe take a couple of those really nice deep breaths that I was talking about. Okay, 2025, it's almost in the rear view. Let's start with just the vibe. It was a weird one. If you had to sum up this year in one word, what would it be? I would actually throw those in the chat. I would actually really like to see them. I have already heard everything from relentless, the worst, desperate, surprising, whiplash. That was another one that I actually feel is a really good one. I was looking to see if I've got any chats here. In the State of Giving report, the BetterUnite State of Giving report, we described 2025 as a year of multiple recoveries, or uneven recovery. That's actually, I think those were the words that we used. This year, let's see, I've got one in the chat too. Broken. Oh, that's a good word. That's a good word. It's uneven. We can at least all land there. Yeah. The story is not linear. It doesn't follow a straight line. It was a patchwork, a mixed bag of, and layered, right? Like one kind of hit would come and then another would layer on top of that. Some of our communities regained a little economic stability, right? 2020, end of 2022, we saw a significant dip, and we've seen things kind of rise since then. It's uneven. It's not fair either. But we do see a bit more economic stability, and it's, depending on who you talk to, somewhat tenuous, built on the earnings. If you look at the stock market of just 10 companies, if you talk to folks, there's certainly a portion of our demographics that are feeling really good about the economy. And then there's those that really, really don't. A lot of people are feeling the effects of inflation and housing strains, social fragmentation, and so many of our nonprofits, as I mentioned earlier, are dealing with significant reduction in government funding. And at the same time, technology and AI have opened up new possibilities and also new inequities. Donors also, they stayed generous. We saw, Giving Tuesday numbers were the highest ever. And they became more selective. So the other piece, and honestly for me, this is just Leah personally, the most disturbing trend is the trust factor. Trust continued to move downward. We've broadly, as a community, as Americans, lost faith in a lot of institutions, and nonprofits are seen, a lot of us, as institutions. So that trust has eroded in public institutions and moved toward local networks, mutual aid, and direct giving. And there's a lot of reasons for all of that I don't have time to go into today, but we can all guess at some of the reasons why. And the fact is, at the end of it all, it doesn't totally matter. What matters is what we do with it. So it's, again, not one big crisis, but several overlapping disruptions. And nonprofits are still recovering from each of these, but having to do it all at the same time, all of the things all at one time. And inside of all of that complexity, we actually did see some bright spots. So total giving stayed strong in 2025. We've seen information from the FEP, the Fundraising Effectiveness Project, Giving Tuesday, and Data Commons. They've released quarterly numbers. Across the US, we saw giving rise modestly, about 3% nationwide when adjusted for inflation. We saw record fundraising on Giving Tuesday, no inflation adjustment necessary then. So that was just literally a week ago today. Another signal that when people are invited, requested, asked to show up, they do. But, and it's a big but, donor participation declined again. And not on Giving Tuesday, but broadly. For the fourth year in a row, we saw that decline about 3%. So, anyway, it's an exponential decline. Fewer people are giving, as even though the overall dollars are holding steady. And one of my favorite lines from our BetterUnite State of Giving report, which we will also send out to you, by the way, as we send out this recording, so you can review all of this data yourself. Generosity stayed strong. Participation did not. The sector is carried by fewer shoulders. I think that sentence is a very important one. And if it lands with you, maybe lands a little too hard, you're not alone. What it means in practical terms is that the top 10% of donors account for over 80% of total dollars raised nationwide. And the top 1% of that account for 40%. So on BetterUnite, on our own platform, we saw 10% of the top 10% of donors provided 58% of the giving. So it's like, this is like this paradox. The glass is half full. Giving is up. Giving Tuesday saw record numbers. Donors are still showing up very generously, but the glass is like half empty or cracked, or there's a leak. Fewer people are giving. Small and mid-level donors continue to decline, and more of our revenue is concentrated in a relatively small group of donors. If 2025 felt like you were on a roller coaster ride, it was emotionally confusing, filled with distraught and anxiety producing, and you have this sense of like, why do I feel hopeful and exhausted all at the same time? This is why. Now that is the macro look. We can zoom in a little bit and take a look, and I'm going to call them, for the purposes of today, word I came up with, we're going to call them the three engines. In marketing, we talk about, or in for-profit world, we talk about the twin engines of marketing and sales, right? We're going to talk about nonprofits as having three engines for this particular year and looking into 2026. We've got recurring donors, when it's relative to revenue, I should say that. Recurring donors, major donors, and events. So let's look at each one of these individually, okay? Engine number one, recurring giving, is a financial anchor. It's one of the clearest stories of 2025. Across the sector, we saw recurring donations that grew about 5 to 8% year over year, and they outperformed one-time gifts in both retention and lifetime value. On BetterUnite, we saw 7.65% of all giving coming in as recurring and 6.15% year over year growth in recurring giving. And bear in mind, BetterUnite is a event and auction led platform. So there's a lot that we can do in there, but we do lead with events and auctions. So we've got, probably there's a big skew towards folks that use BetterUnite exclusively for their events and auctions. And even then, we still saw those numbers in recurring giving. So I'm giving you that context because I know that might sound small, but in a volatile year, that recurring slice is often what keeps budgets from falling apart. It's something to turn to when the noise is turned up. So why is recurring giving, why am I harping on it, right? Why is this so powerful right now? There's a couple of reasons for this. One, and shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody, donors are just used to subscription everything, like Netflix, Spotify, Substack, HBO Max, like you name it, the video game things that my kids have, they're all subscriptions. And then that's just across the board. That's literally for everybody from the baby boomer generation down to Gen Z. But millennials and Gen Zs especially, like they just grew up with subscription. And it's not a surprise. It's nothing unusual. It just subscription style giving just feels normal. So our report notes that these younger donors who are like moving into that greatest wealth transfer that we keep talking about, the $72 trillion wealth transfer that's occurring over the next 20 years, those are the beneficiaries, millennial and Gen Z primarily. Millennials they are in it. They're adulting, right? Like they are our donors now. And I think I'm like late Gen X. So I don't know what I am. I'm somewhere at the very like cusp of Gen X and millennials. So I don't really claim either. But our report does note that these young, so I never know who to say they or us. I'm not sure. But our report notes that these younger donors increasingly prefer that model. And that is a demographic tailwind. So now we know, right? Like pay attention, focus on this. These new donors, these people that are new to the game that might be spending slightly less, right? They don't mind. They love, as a matter of fact, the subscription model. Another reason is recurring donors stabilize budgets. In a world where donor participation is shrinking and the cost of everything is higher, that predictable monthly revenue is like this like ballast in the boat. It evens the keel. It puts you on steady ground. And then finally, recurring donors are your most logical community. They're the ones that are going to read your newsletter. They are going to open your emails. They will attend your events. They bring in other people. They're going to invite their friends. They'll respond to your campaigns and your CTAs. They'll fill out your surveys. So the reframe here on our subscription revenue or our recurring giving is, instead of we're struggling, giving is fragile, we could say our job in 2026 is to treat recurring donors like the VIPs they are. Treat them the same way you treat your major donors. And then to make recurring giving the default, not the exception. So if you want a simple like thought or a simple question to go back to your team with, you could ask, what percentage of our donors are giving recurringly and what percentage of our revenue comes from them? That would be an incredible question to ask. And you pull some data and pull some numbers around that. And then once you have those numbers, ask, what would it look like to double that number over the next 18 to 24 months? And there's your job in 2026. It's really important because you don't get that many more recurring donors by just adding a checkbox during checkout, right? Or by that, default to recurring giving and then make them switch to a one-time donation. You're going to get more. If you aren't doing that now, do it, right? Like that will help. But the real zhuzh in this, the real way to make a difference here is by telling a story of impact. Every month you make XYZ possible for the price of your latte. So when you make the monthly donation that obvious, low friction choices in your online experience, you're going to see a return. Another thing that you can do is go back and take a look in the last 12 months, who made a one-time gift. Include your event attendees, right? And then create or craft a donor journey for just those folks. See who you can convert from having just made that one-time gift into making a recurring gift. Maybe they haven't been asked. That's very likely the case. Maybe you're giving them the opportunity that they wanted. And it's so much easier to ask somebody to make a $10 a month gift, again, the price of my very expensive chai latte at Starbucks, versus asking them to make a one-time $100 gift. And the end result is more money, right? $10 a month. At the end of the year, you have $120. The one-time gift of $100, you got nothing else. And that person probably didn't open any more of your emails. But if they are engaged, if they are there, the other thing about that is that this piece I think gets forgotten a lot. Our recurring donors are far more likely to also make one-time gifts. And the inverse is not true. Our one-time donors are not as likely to make another one-time gift, particularly when you come to thinking about events. So if I'm making a $10 a month donation that's on autopilot, I don't really think about it anymore. If I do think about it, I feel good and I'm doing something really good for this organization. I'm still likely to buy a ticket to your event or sponsor your golf tournament and participate in the event, actually raise my paddle, actually try to win one of the auction items. These are the people that once engaged will continue to exponentially increase their influence with your organization and their footprint on your organization. So don't leave them out there. All right. Engine number 1, recurring donors, we've covered it. Engine number 2, major donors carrying more weight. So when we just look at the facts, income inequality and all of those things aside, the plain fact is in 2025 and in the last 3 years, the donor pyramid has continued to compress inward, to fall in on itself. We've already said it, the top 10% of donors give more than 80% of the dollars nationally, and the top 1% give about 40%. On BetterUnite side, we see that too. 61% of revenue came from gifts larger than each org's median gift size. So let me say that again. More than half, 61%, on its way to 3/4. 61% of the revenue raised by organizations and donors using BetterUnite, 61% of that came from gifts that were larger than the average size gift to the organization. It speaks to major donors. 58% of giving came from the top 10% of donors. Again, well more than half. Well more than half came from the top 10% of the donors. So a lot is riding on a relatively small group of people. And it can and frankly should feel scary. We are too dependent on a handful of donors, and that concern is valid. Andrew, let's see. It's just kind of that adage, right? Of don't put all your eggs in one basket. But what I was about to say is Andrew Carnegie said, I put all my eggs in one basket and I watched that basket. Now, I would like to take a slightly altered approach to that. I think that we do need to work very hard to re-engage our small and micro donors and frankly also mid-level donors. And we need to watch that basket. So if the sector is carried by fewer shoulders, your job is now a couple of things. You need to know those shoulders very, very well. Who's your top 10%? It's very simple. These are, again, questions you can come back and ask your CRM, your database, and your team today. Now that you know who your top 10%, once you know who your top 10% of donors are, who are they? What do they look like? What do they care about? What do they do? How do they like to be talked to? How do they prefer to be communicated with? How do they want to be in touch with you, right? We need to understand these folks and then craft and create experiences and talking points and communication just for them. So you can design real journeys that are for this particular group, this top 10%, and they are not just your thank you letters. So in the State of Giving report that I keep referencing, it says that nonprofits have to invest in donor journeys, personalization, and deeper impact storytelling as this concentration goes. First point was you need to understand who they are. What do they look like? Who are they? And then the next point is you need to, once you understand all of that, craft a journey just for them. And, and then I'm going to go ahead and make my third point is going to be about protecting the relationship. You need to protect the interactions and the communications with that donor as much as the actual transaction itself. Your best donors need to hear from you with something other than an ask. Most of the time, they need to see what they did. They need to understand how what they gave to you impacted their community, because that at the end of the day is what we're all doing. We as donors, as folks interested in nonprofits and folks running them and in folks giving to them, we are trying to make our world, our close-in world, better. So show the donors what their dollars did for their community. Let them take an ownership stake in all of this. A really practical lens for 2026 is to identify your top 10 to 25 most important donor relationships. I didn't say percent there. I said top 10 to 25 relationships, people, and ask, what's the next meaningful touch point for each of these people? And what should that experience look like and be in Q1? And don't let it be an ask. A meaningful touch is, I can like an in-person visit, an invitation to a coffee, and it could be just with them, depending on kind of the level, or it can be with a group of people. People love to be part of something, like the belonging piece that I'm kind of always talking about. They can get a tailored or curated impact update, a video message from someone that they helped. I mean, how much I love, take your iPhone, shoot a video of somebody who, was very impacted by the gift that your donor made. That is so, it's just like getting a card from the class, when you go read to your kids' class and you get this card, then it's signed by all the kids. Like they were just signing it, but that's fine. But like, I still keep them because they mean something to me, because I did a thing and these people were impacted by it. Right. Ask them questions. We've always said, ask for, what's the axiom? How's it going to go? I'm going to get it wrong. Ask for money and you're going to get advice. Ask for advice and you'll get money. These things are very true. They are axioms for a reason, right? If you only did that one thing in 2026, particularly in Q1, if you built thoughtful journeys for your top donors, you would already be more resilient in a concentrated giving environment. And when I'm talking about like journeys and automations and workflows, I really mean the things that I talked about, the invitation to coffee, the video message. They are not just, a bunch of standard, plug in the numbers and, place in the name in merge fields. These are an internal notification to somebody on the team, board member, volunteer, staff, to reach out in a personal way to whomever it is based on their donor profile, right? So you reach out to so-and-so and, just send them a text. Thank you. Hey, we appreciated you today when we did this thing that you donated to, whatever it is. Like, so these are more about making sure that these donors don't get lost in the shuffle than they are about automating everything that they receive. Does that make sense? I hope so. All right. Number 3 engine, events as the dependable workhorse. So we talk about events a whole lot here at BetterUnite. I love events personally. That's been a big part of my career in fundraising and in nonprofit world. So events were really very, very real in 2025. In our data, and this data, again, a little skewed because we are an events heavy platform. We have a lot of folks that are using BetterUnite for events exclusively. But for about half of our organizational revenue this year came for organizations using BetterUnite came from their events. So 50%, that's down actually a little bit from 55%. But honestly, I think that speaks to people using more of BetterUnite as opposed to a demographic trend. When we look across the sector, however, events came roaring back, both in person and hybrid. So we're still seeing the virtual component, especially among like our national organizations, folks that have, chapters in multiple cities, and our NGOs, those organizations that work outside of the US. 25 or many organizations made up to 25 to 35% of their total revenue from their events. So this is like 1 to 2 events in a year, 25 to 35% of their total revenue. Our report says events remain the sector's most dependable engine for acquisition, cultivation, and revenue. And frankly, I think our sentence is missing connection. That's a very key piece of what an event can do for an organization. The nuance here, however, is that only about 10% of event attendees actually donated at the event. Now, those attendees typically have bought a ticket or a sponsorship, or they have donated in some way to the organization in the process of coming to the event. But at the event on site, your activations, your auctions, your fund needs, your live auction, all of the things, only about 10% of those attending are actually participating. So there's room for growth here, right? Even in this green space. It means that we're doing the hard part, right? We've got planning and hosting and getting your board to ask people to sponsor and invite their people and give you their table guest names, caterers, florists, the lighting design, all of it. AV folks, I don't want to leave anybody out because you all do such important jobs with events, but we're doing all of that, right? We got it. We've got this. And we're leaving a lot of money on the table. And we're leaving a lot of relationship building on the table. So how do we reframe 2025 here looking to 2026? Instead of, honestly, this is the place where I think that we could really use the deep breath the most and a true shift. Instead of saying, like, I love that John Lennon's mother would say, instead of saying that you're sick, say you're healing, because the way that you talk to yourself really does impact you. Instead of saying events are exhausting, but we have to do them. What if this time you just challenge yourself, maybe just for the next month, maybe just for the next week, instead of saying, oh, here comes our event, we say, events are one of our most powerful relationship accelerators. So in 2026, we're going to design them more intentionally. That was a very wordy sentence that I have written down. So maybe you change it to what you would actually say to yourself. But the point is, try hard to change the way that you are looking at and thinking about and the energy that you're putting towards your events. So it could actually, so outside of the woo-woo and the way that you're talking to yourself and thinking about it, however, I think that's very important. We can also take some very practical steps, like designing some clear conversation goals. Or, I'm sorry, let me say that again. Designing some clear conversion goals for each event. So instead of saying, well, I'm not going to say instead of, adding to all of the metrics that we're going to track at our event, we could also say, for this year, we want 20% of our attendees to become first-time donors, or we want 15% of our attendees to join our recurring giving community. Like, shift your metrics, change what you're tracking, and let it, as opposed to looking at only the nighttime numbers or daytime or whenever the event is, only the one time, let's put it that way, event numbers, look at the long arc of it. Like, I love this about BetterUnite. We love converting final moments into a way that you can cultivate a donor over an extended period of time. So making your fund to need moment the star of the show, not just super rushed 5 minutes at the end of the live auction. Making your cocktail hour a connection hour. Let people know when they are signing up to come to the event that this will be an opportunity to network and meet people, and that is something that you as an organization hold dear and value and are lifting up in the context of the event. Use your event data in BetterUnite or whatever CRM you use to follow up with the attendees that didn't give. So, you showed up. Thank you. Here's an easy way to keep the impact going. It's really simple and straightforward. You can actually do that via text the day after the event while the momentum is still there. You can do that. I honestly would probably first, actually you could do that in the automated receipting post-event that they get once you've moved through your checkout. That's typically a couple of days. And honestly, people don't really look at that a lot of times for, several days, even weeks later. But first, post-event, thank you for the transaction is a really good time to say, here's what you're doing. Here's what you've become a part of. Here's what we are inviting you to understand and know better, right? So sharing an impact story, not just numbers, some numbers too. You never know what love language people speak. Some people really need to hear the numbers. Other people, that's actually only about 25% of people that really will absorb the numbers, and that's the way that they want to be communicated with. It's about a quarter. 75% of people want the story. They want the music. They want to be pulled in by other means. So have both. Yeah. The events aren't just about the dollars in the room. They're about creating the belonging and the emotional connection that fuels giving throughout the year. It is this very unique time that nonprofits get, that no other entity in the world gets on a regular basis. It is expected for us to stand in front of our community and celebrate the wins and ask for support. And then that's the important part, the and then. And then you have this runway of a whole year until your next event to continue the conversation with the people that are in that room. So that takes us to the next big shift. Let's talk about the donors themselves. Donors in 2025 do not behave like donors in 2020. This is like one of my favorite pieces to pull out and to talk to you guys about today. So I was reading through all of this. Their expectations, their motivations, their trust patterns, it all has shifted, and it's all shifted in these really meaningful and important ways. One of my favorite pages in the State of Giving report, we compare donor expectations in 2020 versus 2025. Now, 2020 was another very strange year for nonprofits, but these pieces were kind of everything up to 2020 and now looking at 2025 and looking ahead. So the quick kind of down and dirty is the ease of giving. Back in 2020, mobile giving was optional. In 2025, it's not just expected, it's essential. It's the only way that people want to be able to donate. In 2020, transparency was considered kind of helpful, right? Like, I might look into this nonprofit. I might want to understand more. Today, it's an absolute non-negotiable. You have to put your best foot forward and show up and talk about who you are in a very real and a very transparent way. It is just required. Belonging. In 2020, this was an emerging idea. Like we still spoke mostly in numbers. When I was a frontline fundraiser, up till 2021, belonging was not a word that I threw around. Today, it is like the only word. If you've joined more than one webinar with me, or if you've watched any of my social posts, you have heard me talk about belonging a lot. We inviting people in, and they're in your front yard, right, at your event. We need to open the door and ask them in for tea. That's a really key way of bringing people together in today's world in 2025. Central driver. Recurring giving in 2020 was encouraged, right? Like, monthly giving first, and then you have to switch it over to a one-time donation. Today, we need to shift to make it expected. I'm not going to say that that's true across the board right now, but I do think that I frankly do think that checkout place is pretty expected. We most of the time typically, expect to see that you've asked me for a monthly donation before you've let me make a one-time donation. But moving beyond that into that journey, moving into, how we get people to shift from one-time donation to recurring giving, key. Personalization. It was really general in 2020. I really very rarely even did merge text fields beyond the thank you notes, like for my newsletters and so forth. That was just not something that we did. Today, everything is highly segmented. You can go back and watch our webinar with Rachel Muir talking about email marketing for nonprofits, or just really how, email strategies for nonprofits. She's going to talk so much about segmentation. Do not send the same email out to everybody in your email list. It's just not something that we need to do anymore. Direct giving. In 2020, this was still pretty limited to like GoFundMe pages. In 2025, over half of Americans now participate in direct giving to individuals or mutual aid. So that has really exploded. And I think the ramification there for our nonprofits is, again, this personalization, understanding who folks are, speaking to them very directly, and letting them talk to other humans. Let people behind the curtain. Let them see that there are people behind the mask of the wizard, right? That's what we all want. We live in a world of voyeurism. That's the voyeurist economy, right? With TikTok and Instagram influencers and everything else. We all kind of want to peek behind and see what real life looks like, even though it's not real. It's like curated real life. That's okay. We seem to be fine with that. So moving on. You go do that. All right. And what does all of this mean for you? Belonging is the new retention strategy. The U.S. Surgeon General called loneliness a public health crisis in 2023, and that theme has only intensified. If you have teenagers, you're likely following folks like Jonathan Haidt and like I am, and understanding that these, the anxious generation they are now Gen Z, and they are now donating, and we need to engage everybody. Frankly, it's an epidemic for a reason. For nonprofits, this shows up as donors staying engaged when they feel seen and valued and heard and connected and a part of something bigger than them. Identity-based donor communities and culturally aligned spaces are growing quickly, especially among Gen Z and millennials. And our report says, belonging beats messaging. Retention now depends on relationships, not campaigns. So if your year felt like there were so many emails and not a whole lot happened, That's why. People want relational connection. That's what we get to give them at events. They are a very quick shortcut to relational connection. But outside of events, which we can't host every single day, the emails, the text messages, the videos that we post, all of that needs to be very real, somewhat vulnerable, and really speak to individual humans where they are. Since we saw direct giving and mutual aid surge, we know that more than half of Americans now give directly to individuals or mutual aid networks before they give to a traditional nonprofit, especially among younger voters, Black and Latino voters, and lower income households. So this is not a threat. It's a wake-up call. Nonprofits have to earn trust through transparency, cultural fluency, and authenticity. That's what I'm talking about when I mean vulnerable. When I said vulnerability, I mean authenticity. Be who you are and be unafraid to share it. This is the Brene Brown work, right? Donors want to know who is making the decisions. How close are you to the people you serve? How much do they look like me? Are you a part of the community, or are you just serving it, right? Do you live in this with me? Multi-gift donors became the quiet MVPs. Only about 15% of donors gave more than once during the year. These, like your multi-gift your multi-gift donors are gold. They represent opportunity. They represent stability in a shrinking donor pool. They respond when you send them consistent communication, clear impact stories, and very bespoke, tailored calls to action. So again, let's just take a breath and reframe. Instead of our list is shrinking, everything is harder, what if we said, we have a smaller but more committed core, and our job is now to serve them and love them very, very well. So, okay, let's put it all together and we're going to look ahead. We've talked about uneven recovery and concentrated giving. We've talked about recurring giving as an anchor. We've talked about major donors carrying more weight, that events are our powerhouse connectors, but they are under leveraged. We've talked about donors that are expecting belonging and transparency and personalization. So now how do we take all of that and reframe 2025 as we head into 2026? So rather than giving you answers, I would like to offer questions that you can take back to your team or your board and think of these as an agenda for your first 2026 strategy session. Okay. And again, you're going to get all these, so don't worry about writing them down. Question number 1, what is the story our 2025 data is telling us? Not what we wish was true. That would be nice. But the story that the numbers actually tell. How many people gave? How many gave more than once? What percentage of revenue came from your top 10%? How much came from events, from recurring giving? In our State of Giving report, we talk about data, or we talk about letting data tell you where to pay attention. So if 50% of your revenue comes from events, that deserves some serious strategic thought. Whatever it is, pay attention, but let your data guide your vision. So now question number 2, who are our core people? Your top 10 to 20 donors by revenue, your recurring givers, your multi-gift donors, the volunteers or ambassadors that always are there for you. What would it look like to design 2026 exclusively around them? Their experience, their hopes, their desire for the nonprofit, their sense of belonging, their insight. Instead of like this generic mailing list, what if we listened to the most core people to the nonprofit and heard what they said and acted on that? Okay. Question number 3. Where are we making belonging real, not just saying the word, right? It's so easy for me to sit up here and say, oh, belonging is very important. You should invite everybody in. Let's give them a cup of tea. They're at your front door. Yeah, I really understand that that's like, sounds nice, Leah, but like, what do I do? Here's some other, so I'm trying not to give you answers, but I want to give you some questions that you can ask of yourself, because every organization is different. We're made of different people. And that's the wonderful and magical thing about it all, is that no two organizations are the same. Everybody's a special snowflake. So here's some questions. Do people, when they are on your front lawn, do they feel known by name? Do they feel invited into community with others who share their same common values? Do they feel informed, not just asked or solicited? If you did one experiment in 2026 and all of 2026, maybe you try creating a small named donor community. So much data will tell us that these are very, very impactful. They really, really have begun to work. And it's very much about belonging, inclusivity. I'm giving to somebody that looks like, I'm giving along with somebody else that looks just like me, right? Like we may not look like the people that the nonprofits serve, but do I look like the other people donating to that effort? That's a really key distinction and a very important point. Your recurring giving circles, your young professionals group, your legacy society, create them, but then they don't need to live in just one giving level on your page. Really treat it like a community. Maybe there's a Slack group. Maybe there's a Facebook group. There's an Instagram group that's just for those folks. Maybe there's a once a quarter coffee for them. There's a specialty newsletter for those people. Let it be real. Let it feel important. And you make it important to you. It will then come across as important to your donors. They'll understand that they're not just a part of a segmented list. All right, my fourth question, how are we preparing for 2026 tax changes and a more selective donor? This was by some measures, blow, and by some measures, wind for our 2026 looking ahead. I was at a talk that Eric Daubert with the Lilly School of Philanthropy at Indiana University, he gave last week at the Nonprofit Power Conference. And he said, and he's putting his money on 2026 is the year of the small donor. He thinks, his assessment is that these tax changes will hopefully empower nonprofits to really cultivate and pay attention to smaller donors, because the tax incentives are not there in the same way as they were for our major donors. It's yet to be seen. We'll find out. None of this starts until 2026. So just note to self that the end of this year is a very good time to reach out to your donors giving, non-itemized, or excuse me, the donors filing as itemized, which would generally be much higher level donors. Those folks you want to reach out to right now and say your gift will have more impact for you this year as opposed to next. But, like conventional wisdom would tell us that it's likely not going to change all that much. It's not that, folks at that level are not always giving for the tax write-off. But for our smaller donors and the non-itemized ones, they will receive a bigger benefit when they make donations. Our State of Giving report flags 2026 tax changes as likely to reshape donor behavior. It's not about scaring donors with your tax laws, with our new tax laws. It's really about being ready with clear value propositions. Like, why is your mission important, smart, equitable, high impact? Why is it the place they should give? Be proactive with your donors and advisors so that they're thinking about you when they make these decisions. And my final question, question 5, you can ask yourself and your board and all of your team at your next, and just mull on it over the next couple of days. Where can we automate the routine so we can humanize the impact? This is my favorite question. In our last page of our report, we say that recurring giving, event optimization, and donor automation are the pillars of next year's growth. I really believe this in my core to be true. Automation is not about being less personal. It's about freeing up human time for the conversations that actually deepen relationships. Automating as much as possible around your event setup. Let the software create your tables as people are buying their sponsorships, so that you're not having to go in and do all of that manual labor, so that you can send a personalized text message or quick video to a couple of your major donors, or maybe just handpick a few one-time donors and do the same. How special would that be, right? It could look like an automated thank you sequence that's warm and on brand being very important. As much as I keep saying, and I think I said this in the last webinar, belonging is the new branding. Branding is still very important. These things don't mean that the other things go away. It's just that we need to add to and maybe reshift to focus a little bit. You can send automated reminders before and after events. All of that stuff can be set up and then just done, and you're not having to do any of it. We can create simple journeys and workflows for our new donors so that they don't fall through cracks, as I mentioned earlier. And so when we combine all of that, like really smart tech and leverage some generative AI as we're creating and writing the words, human in and human out, but still leverage AI in the middle of it, that can really help with the relational work of your staff and your board and your volunteers. So we get fundraising and your development program that is scalable and deeply human. And those are the two things that we really need in one. So as we close, I want to come back to the emotional side of all of this. I'm always interested in self-care for those of us that work with nonprofits. Our sector has a great deal of turnover and burnout, and those things are very real, and they actually weigh heavily on me personally. And our company, we actually we do a lot about this. We talk a lot about it. So this year in particularly, 2025 likely felt heavy for many, if not all of you. It certainly did for us over here. And it felt that way. 2025 felt heavy because it was. You've all been fundraising and working with nonprofits in a landscape where prices are up, costs are up, staff capacity is stretched, donor expectations are even higher. And then the headlines that just kept coming, they were rarely on our side. But when we look closely at the data, we also see donors still giving very generously. Recurring and multi-gift donors showing up with real loyalty and increasing. We see events still being powerful engines for connection and relationship and revenue. We see that people are craving belonging and meaning and connection with their community and collective, which is exactly what nonprofits offer. So the reframe I would love to leave you with: 2025 wasn't just a hard year to survive. It was a year that clarified where your real strength lies. Your strength is your core community, in the donors that show up more than once, in the people who keep coming to your events, in the board members, those dear board members that still invite all of their friends, even if you have to harangue them to do it, the volunteers that will do literally anything for your mission. If you walk into 2026 committed to deepening those relationships with your core, making recurring giving and events work smarter than they ever have before for you, and building real belonging and transparency into everything that you do, you will be ahead of the curve. If you would like help reading your own 2025 data through this lens and turning it into a concrete plan for 2026, our BetterUnite team does this every single day. In the report, we talk about sitting down with organizations that looking at their recurring giving and event performance and donor journeys and helping them build a strong, confident plan for the year ahead. So I will, as I said, be sending out the State of Giving 2025 report along with this recording. And if you're watching the recording of this talk, send us an email, support@betterunite.com, or you can email me directly, Leya, Leya, @betterunite.com, and we would be more than happy to send this report over to you as well. You can use the sections that we talked about as a conversation guide. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing. Thank you for holding the line in your communities in a year that frankly asked too much of you. I'm so grateful to all that you do and all that you are. Let's continue to go do some good. So I'm going to share my screen one more time here and let you know that next week in the 501c drop, it's me again, getting a lot of me, but we're going to look ahead at 2026. Today was about reframing 2025. So it's kind of a launch pad for 2026. Next week, we're going to talk about what we can perhaps expect in 2026 as we dive right in, move ahead with a whole lot of lessons learned. So I would love to have you join me. The QR code is right there. And then if you are not a BetterUnite user, obviously we would love to show you around. As I mentioned, we can talk to you about a plan for implementing some of these ideas with your own, looking at your data. We do this all the time. We really love to do it. Bring it into a BetterUnite account and you can analyze it here or analyze it elsewhere. And we can talk to you about your events or auctions or however you want to jump on that. We are here for you. So scan that and you will get a demo of what BetterUnite can do. Or if you're already a BetterUnite user, go ahead and send any questions that you have to Leya@betterunite.com. Actually, that's for everybody. But also, if you are a BetterUnite user and you want to talk to our team, support@betterunite.com, obviously, or email your account manager. If you don't know who your account manager is, then send an email to support. We'll connect you. And again, sales@betterunite.com if you are not a current user. And that is all I have for today. I just wanted to say thank you again for everything that you've done in this very difficult year. We see you. We appreciate you. We're so happy that you're here. You're the reason that we're here too. Thank you again. I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of your Tuesday. Let's go do some good.